So, this might get a lot of people upset because today we are diving into the Montreal Canadiens and a few ideas that have been tossed out there on social media as to what guys are worth. No, we are not buying and selling Monopoly pieces here, folks. We are going over to trade talk. Because a few weeks ago we had ourselves a Marc-Olivier Beaudoin who went out there on Twitter and posted this question. Bonjour, okay, we're not gonna read it in French, we're gonna go out there and describe this in English. By the way, this post was made on November 18th, 2024, so it is a few weeks old, and some of the numbers might not actually be too accurate. For the sake of keeping the tweet the same, I'll screenshot the tweet and put it up on the screen, but the numbers that we read off will indeed be current updated numbers for the Canadiens as of this morning, Tuesday, December 3rd, 2024. But Marc-Olivier Beaudoin went out there and asked this, let's play a game. Tell me what you think these players could fetch the Montreal Canadiens in a trade, either immediately or at the trade deadline. Mike Matheson, who had at the time 12 points in 18 games, right now he's got 14 points in 22 games. David Savard, who has himself a whopping 5 points in 23 games right now. Christian Dvorak, who has himself 8 points in 24 games, so he's only gotten 1 more point in 6 games since this tweet's publication. Joel Armia, who is at 10 points in 24 games right now, so he added 2 more points since then. And Jake Evans, who right now has 12 points in 24 games. You can see that out of all the guys that we've been talking about here, the only ones that have actually increased their production to a meaningful capacity were Jake Evans, and I guess you could say Mike Matheson. I mean, Matheson had 2 more points since this tweet's publication in 6 more games. David Savard only had 1, Dvorak only had 1, Armia had 2, and then you had Jake Evans with 4. These guys really have not been producing much since this tweet was made on November 18th, 2024, but I thought the question was intriguing enough to dive into, especially when you read some of the replies and even Marc-Olivier Beaudoin's own response to this quandary. It's no secret that Montreal Canadiens fans have been thinking about and talking about trades for the past few weeks here, and there are a bunch of Canadiens fans in their replies to this tweet saying what they think these guys could go for. Oh, this player could go for X pick, this other player could go for Y pick, but Marc-Olivier Beaudoin went out there and said this in his opinion. Mike Matheson would fetch a first-round pick plus drinkable hope, which I don't know what that means. The actual tweet that he had said espoir potable, and I don't know what that means. Nope, sorry. I think it means like a prospect that's actually tangible and not like some random ragtag out of nowhere he's never gonna make the league kind of guy. An actual prospect here. But it's listed here for Mike Matheson, a first plus a prospect, David Savard, a third and a fourth, Christian Dvorak, a fourth, Joel Armia, salary retained, a second, and Jake Evans with a second. Too optimistic? Not optimistic enough? I know many will disagree about Jake Evans, but a player like that is worth his weight in gold as depth for an aspiring club. And with this in mind, I wanted to dive into each of these 5 trade pieces and whether or not these trade prices would actually be accurate here. Starting out with Mike Matheson, a first-round pick plus a prospect. I feel like Matheson is one of these guys where if you had traded him this summer, after he had that 60-point season where he was one of the top defensemen in the NHL in points, if you had traded him then, oh boy, he could have fetched you a really big return. Mike Matheson was seen as one of these underrated Canadiens guys that really put himself on the map with his point production, but I feel like a lot of that was just by default. The fact that he was forced to play all those minutes and that he was only on the power play because there wasn't really anybody else that could man the point on that unit. Sure, now you have Lane Hutson, and he's going to be really putting himself in that spot long-term, but Mike Matheson doesn't really have anything to gain from Hudson's presence on the team, and as a result, when you think about how he's been declining in his overall play, how his numbers have not looked all too great compared to last season, how he has that -4 game as of late, how he said it was one of the worst games he had ever played as a hockey player, yeah, I'm sort of thinking that this guy's value on the trade market is going down a little bit here, even though he had himself that stellar season last year. Is he still worth a first? Probably. I mean, it's tough to go out there and say that a guy who scored 60 points from the blue line last season is not worth a first-round pick, but if the Canadiens want to trade Matheson, they might have to do it soon, unless they really get the best out of him over the next few weeks here or so. It's going to be really difficult for this guy to garner any significant value in a trade exchange if he ends up declining in points and continues down this downward spiral. Meanwhile, you go over to the second guy, David Savard. Marc-Olivier Beaudoin predicts a third and a fourth, which I actually don't know if that's really giving Savard enough credit here. Sure, Montreal Canadiens fans could say that David Savard isn't like the most impressive, most outstanding, most important guy, but guys who play like David Savard generally do get a lot more return than a third or a fourth. I forgot which insider it was. It might have been Frank Saravelli, or it might have been somebody else that believes that David Savard could get a first-round pick in the trade market. And that checks out, not necessarily because David Savard is a first-round caliber player, but the style that he plays and the service that he provides is valuable. Shut down right-handed defenseman who can block shots and play well in his own zone. Those are worth a fortune, and sometimes you see more out of these defensively minded guys than players who can produce 60 points a year like Mike Matheson, for example. I would not be surprised if David Savard went for a relatively high amount compared to what we think he could be going for, versus a Mike Matheson who could even be traded for less. Not less than Savard, but for less than what we expect, if you get what I mean. So David Savard, third and a fourth? Yeah, no, I think that's a little bit low here. Moving over to Christian Dvorak, a fourth-round pick. Oh yeah, that's a lot for him. I don't think Christian Dvorak really provides much value at all. On the trade market, he is the most guyest guys of all guys. When you talk about hockey guys, yeah, that's a guy. He plays hockey. He's there. There's nothing outstanding about Christian Dvorak in his game. He is the most standard, normal guy in the league at this point, and everybody knows that he is not really anything for the Montreal Canadiens other than a player who's definitely not going to be on the team next year and beyond. Is there even a use for a guy like Christian Dvorak? Well, sure, you can say that two-way caliber centers like him are somewhat valuable, but he's in this sort of territory of being such a guy, just a normal guy, that really, I think most NHL teams have somebody on their organization that's probably better than Dvorak. I mean, he's on pace for 28 points this season, which is not terrible, but then again, when you talk about deployment, when you talk about effectiveness, there really isn't anything special, I would say, about Christian Dvorak at this point in his career. So, yeah, fourth-round pick. If you can get yourselves a team that actually wants to trade for this guy, then okay, fourth. Let's just settle on with that. Moving over on to the other two over here. Joel Armia with salary retained, a second-round pick, and Jake Evans, a second-round pick. I actually do agree that Jake Evans would be the most valuable piece out of this group. Of forwards, at least, David Savard and Matheson not included, but Jake Evans has been such a good player for the Canadiens in a bottom six role. There's a lot of value that he brings that is not just, okay, two-way defensively minded center play. He's got an offensive edge to him too, and he's got pace. He plays with some really good penalty-killing instincts. Christian Dvorak just does not have that, in my opinion. There's a lot more value out of Evans than Dvorak at this point in their careers. And for Joel Armia, I mean, he's a guy with a lot of experience. He's a playoff vet. He has that big frame. I feel like a lot of players and opposing teams just don't like playing against Joel Armia because of that reach, because of the physical tools. He is one of these players that actually makes lives difficult for opposition, and I can't say the same about Christian Dvorak, to be honest. So Joel Armia fetching a higher return with salary retained, yeah, no, that makes sense to me. Is it higher than what a Jake Evans could get, for example? Who really knows? I'm not too sure about that, but you can let me know your thoughts in the comment section below whether or not you think it's actually a feasible result. But I'll pose the same question to y'all in the comment section as the writer over here, Marc-Olivier Beaudoin, went out there and spoke about. What are your opinions on potential trade ideas for these guys? Matheson, Savard, Dvorak, Armia, and Jake Evans. Do you agree with these trade return ideas? Is this the proper assets being revealed as to what they could fetch on the market? Do you think some of these guys are being overvalued, undervalued? Let me know in the comment section which one is which and what you think these guys could end up going for, and if they're actually going to be traded at all. If Jake Evans ends up staying with the Canadiens, for example, then okay, this entire video isn't really all too relevant. But for now, thoughts in the comment section below about the Canadiens and their trade values for their guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.